Hi, I'm Franz from NewOrbit. I'm here to give you a quick overview of our updated minimum recommended practice for securing your platform as a service or PaaS application in Microsoft Azure. As I'm sure you're aware, the threat landscape is constantly evolving and Microsoft keeps bringing out new services and features in Azure to help you secure your applications. So therefore we have updated our minimum recommended practice, and this video will give you a quick overview of what we now recommend as a minimum. So as I'm sure you're aware, there's just more and more attacks out there. There's more and more attack vectors and new threats that are surfaced all the time. What's really been happening over the last several years is that cybercrime has become an organized industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry with lots of different providers working together, and they are really going more and more for the low-hanging fruit, the opportunistic attacks, and they can do that at scale through automated systems. If your system is vulnerable, there's a good chance you might be hit by a drive-by attack. To counter this ever-increasing threat, Microsoft and others are constantly releasing new features and products to help protect your systems. Trying to keep up with this is really like drinking from a fire hose, but that's part of what we do here at NewOrbit. So what we're going to talk about today is what we consider the minimum for any PaaS application in Azure from all of those capabilities that Microsoft have released. This has changed quite significantly over the last several years as Microsoft have developed these capabilities in Azure. So chances are, if you designed your system a few years ago, there's a good chance that you are not using at least some of these features today. The simple truth is that opportunistic hackers go for the softer targets. It's just like if your car is the only one without a car alarm, it is more likely to be stolen. If your system is the only one without these basic security features, it's just more likely to be hacked by an opportunistic hacker. So what does it look like? Well, there are 5 key features in Azure that we recommend you utilize, and we're just going to go through them now. Again, there's a lot more you can do depending on your risk exposure, but if you do nothing else, at least do these 5 things. So the first is network isolation. So when you create something in Azure, say a database or a storage account or function app or whatever, by default it can be open to maybe the whole internet or maybe all of the Azure networks, and that makes it nice and easy to start using it. But it also means that an attacker, if they know the address and the password for that service, then they can access it. With network isolation, we can put services that don't need to be accessible from outside into an isolated network and then put network rules up that controls who can access it. And that basically means that even if an attacker has the password that for your database, for example, they still can't get to it. The second thing is trying to solve the problem of passwords and secrets. So again, you're probably aware, if you want to connect to a database, you're going to need a password. That password has to be created by someone and then stored somewhere. That means it can be leaked and it can be used by a hacker, or it can be used by a user. And if a user uses it, even if it's for legit purposes, it means your audit logs are now not telling the true story about who accessed the system. Those are both bad things. Managed Identity solves this problem by allowing you to log in as, say, the actual web app. You can declare in Azure that web app is this database user, and it works right down at that level. And that means only code running in the web app can act on, say, the database as that user. Now, it's important to understand Managed Identity can be used on almost all services in Azure today, including your own. So if, for example, you need one of your web apps to talk to a function app, for example, you can use Managed Identity to secure that too. The third thing is Azure Defender. So Defender is Microsoft's term for pretty much all of their security products. Azure Defender for Cloud is about a dozen different products that is specifically focused on Azure. Broadly speaking, they do 2 things. One is what you'd call posture management. So for example, there's a product called Cloud Security Posture Management that will analyze your Azure setup, and it might say to you, oh, that service is not behind a VNet, or it'll say, oh, you got TLS 1.0 enabled on the web app, and so on. And there's the different flavors of products will do different sort of static analysis like that. That then gives you a checklist that you can go and basically fix those issues. So that's extremely helpful. In addition to that, there's quite a few automatic management tools where Azure Defender for Cloud will monitor your system in real time and use both static rules and artificial intelligence and machine learning to detect anomalies and attack patterns that are going on. So for example, it might detect that there's a SQL injection attack hanging on your database, or it might detect that somebody's trying to hack your web app, etc., etc. The fourth thing is logging and monitoring. So if you don't have good logging and monitoring on your system, you're unlikely to know if somebody's already in your system. We recommend using application insights and log analytics and the alerts in Azure that you can create to monitor your system. Application Insights is not really a security product per se, but it's very good at detecting anomalies like high CPU usage or an increased number of errors on your web application and so on. All things that often happen when somebody's trying to hack your system. So it's a really good tool for that, in addition to all the other benefits it can give you. The fifth thing is front door. So front door is basically sits between your web application and the internet. That means all traffic from the internet goes through front door before it gets sent to the web app. And that means that on its own will immediately eliminate a whole class of attacks. In addition, you can add rules into front door. So for example, you might block access from a certain country, or if you have spotted that somebody's actually trying to hack your system right now, if you can find some patterns in their requests, you can go and load in a rule into front door that blocks those. You can also plug in other modules into front door, like there's a web application firewall module you can plug in if you want, and so on and so on. I should add, there are other tools in Azure that can do exactly the same as front door, and they might be appropriate for you, but front door is a really good default. And there you have it. So these things are not particularly difficult to implement. It's really something you should consider the bare minimum for every system. In addition to this, we do recommend that you carry out a full security review to consider what other features you might need specific to your risk exposure. What we have described here really is the bare minimum. So if you're already a NewOrbit customer, we will be in touch with you to discuss how we can help you implement these new features on your system. And if you're not already a NewOrbit customer and you want to get some help, please do get in touch. We're always happy to answer questions. We do like to talk about Azure. Alternatively, if you want us to carry out a full security review on your Azure setup, we can absolutely do that. And in that we will look at your risk exposure, and we will look at these things we've discussed here, and also recommend a number of other things that might be appropriate given your specific circumstances. Thank you for watching.